past year has been full of adversity. Nowhere is that more true than in education, and no group has struggled quite like America's school children. That's why, when schools began to shut down and send kids home, the wireless industry stepped in to make sure homebound children could continue their education and stay in touch with teachers and classmates. Thanks to innovative programs and partnerships with school districts across the country, including free and discounted devices and data plans, and millions of dollars in donations and resources, we've helped more than 2.4 million kids stay connected and stay in school. But even as the case numbers fall and the schools open up, we know the job isn't done. There's more work to be done to close the homework gap and address the digital divide. That's why I'm so pleased to host our Connected Kids Summit Part 2. This event brings together leaders from the wireless industry, from US Cellular, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, alongside partners from the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, Digital Promise, Connected Nation, and Grow Associates, to talk about how they address the challenges in the earliest days of the shutdown, and how they continue to work together to ensure that every kid, everywhere, can stay connected and stay learning. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Jillian Petrie, Director of Public Affairs for CTIA. As we continue this conversation on the importance of keeping students connected, I'm thrilled to be here virtually with two fantastic guests. I'm pleased to introduce Cortland Maddock, Vice President of Marketing at US Cellular, and Chad Royal Pasco, Acting Senior Vice President of Resource Development at Boys and Girls Clubs of America. US Cellular and Boys and Girls Clubs of America teamed up in a really special way to help students stay connected during the COVID-19 pandemic. So to kick this off, we'd love to hear a little bit about the background of the partnership. Cortland, let's start with you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here to talk about an area that I am both personally and professionally passionate about today. We have had a long-standing relationship with the Boys and Girls Club in our communities. For more than 20 years, we've made annual donations to support those clubs in several of our communities. But back in 2015, we really formalized our relationship, and we have donated $1 million each year to support not only the academic programming, but also provide educational opportunities to more than 300,000 youth at our local clubs. It's something we're really passionate about. Our associates have volunteered countless hours at their local clubs. We've worked with our sponsorship partners to donate thousands of event tickets, devices, merchandise, and unique experiences to the youth in our markets. Boys and Girls Clubs have been such a pillar in our local communities, and this pandemic has really just shined a light on how much impact their programming and services have on our kids, the families, and the communities where we serve as well. Technology has become a lifeline for all of us, but especially for education during the pandemic, to really ensure that our youth can communicate and participate in remote learning no matter where they live. And we know even beyond education, technology has become just such a lifeline for all of us, whether that's a virtual doctor's visit or communicating with family and friends. We were looking for ways to continue to help students, and we knew we had a great partner in Boys and Girls Club to work with.
As Cortland had mentioned, is that we've been an official longstanding partner since 2015, but like so many of our relationships with our partners is that there were antecedents of the relationship far before that in our local communities. And US Cellular has been a great supporter of clubs in their communities and now has grown that we're providing direct links to over 300,000 club kids. We have conversations on an ongoing basis, and I think that that's the reason why we are such longstanding partners and have been an innovative partner, always looking to make an impact and truly move the needle. So as we have those conversations, we're constantly keeping our eye on focusing on how are we going to impact academic success of our kids and how are we going to make sure that they have access to technology, and those needs are going to change all the time.
So how did the Hotspot donation program come about, and why is it so important?
Yeah, as I mentioned, technology and particularly wireless hotspots have become that lifeline for education during the pandemic, where youth are able, and actually multiple youth are able to leverage one hotspot to participate in their e-learning. And at US Cellular, we really wanted to do our part to ensure that the youth in our communities where we have service have the resources they need to stay connected when they may not be able to go to a classroom. we saw news stories, and all of us did, right, of kids going to great lengths in order to find internet access. And I want to be clear, this isn't a new problem, but it is something the pandemic completely magnified. Wireless technology can really be key to providing broadband service for families in both urban and rural areas. And we really believe that every child deserves access to reliable internet access. So with the Boys and Girls Community Clubs in all of our communities being so essential, we immediately thought of them as our partners. And by working with them, we're really focusing on traditional after-school groups, which is something that is just as important as schools as others, right? But as I'm sure Chad is about to tell you, these clubs have become so much more than just after-school hubs these days.
Yes, and so Corlin's right. During COVID, we really pivoted a lot as our clubs did. And our clubs were not after school, they were all day. As really everybody struggled with how do you provide education to kids in a remote setting, in a virtual setting, in an online setting. And we really became a virtual club in addition to clubs that were open from the very morning until the very night. So the students who were coming to our clubs for virtual learning to utilize our internet access, and that put an enormous strain on our clubs because we had more kids that were coming that would try to access that internet, and we really needed reliable service for them. So when US Cellular came to us with this idea, of course, we were thrilled. Clubs could use the hotspots to supplement their existing infrastructure that they already had in place. And I think that more importantly, and one of the bigger innovative things is that kids could actually check out those hotspots so that they could take them home and finish their homework if needed, because we know that in many cases, they didn't have that access at home either.
Gosh, I mean, that's fantastic. And what do you guys hope to accomplish through this program?
I can share a little bit of what we hope to accomplish, and I should say are accomplishing as well. And so this is actually already being realized, is that kids fall through the cracks in our system. And especially if they don't have the access that they need. And we know that the kids that we serve day in and day out in our clubs, they don't have the access that they need, and they don't have the access that their peers do. And kids of all ages and grade levels need to be able to access the internet now more than ever. It's absolutely essential to their education. Learning and homework is all done online now, and that's where you get your grades and that's where you get your feedback. So there, you have to have that for that dialogue to be taking place back and forth with your educators as well. So reliable access to internet is so important for a child to continue that journey for their academic success. So these hotspot donations are vitally important to a child, that they continue their learning and that they don't fall behind. And I will say that during the pandemic is that, the studies are still being done on that, but an average is that you have kids that have fallen 5 to 12 months behind in their learning.
Yeah, I mean, it's so impactful when you think about how big of an impact that could be, right? We really believe that we just are getting started in our partnership here and in really improving some of the hard effects that we're going to see from the pandemic long term, right? We started small so we could learn along the way and make the best program it can be, both for the students and logistically for the clubs. And it wasn't going to be a one-size-fits-all approach, right? Every club in every community has different needs. And as America's locally grown wireless carrier, we really feel like we're uniquely set up to meet those needs and partner together. So we started small, right? We trialed with 3 clubs in Wisconsin and just 25 devices. And we learned a ton just from that, honestly. But a turning point moment really happened when we said we need to think differently. When the Boys and Girls Club of Midlands in Omaha, Nebraska lost their CARES funding at the end of 2020. And they were in jeopardy of losing over 500 service on over 500 hotspots. We were able to actually jump in and provide service for 18 months for those hotspots so we could make sure those students continue to have the access they need. And that's going to be really critical to this program's success, is not taking a one-size-fits-all approach. Sometimes it's going to be hotspots. It may be service. We're going to partner together and really make sure that we can be successful as we continue to work through this pandemic and coming out of it and continue to build that strong partnership.
Just a little bit. I would share just a little bit of feedback from the clubs as well. And so, it's great to hear what I have to say from a national perspective. But I think that when you hear it from the club directors, who are the ones that are really actually implementing these programs, it's so different. And so, in addition to being used to boost internet access for members at 14 metro area clubs in Omaha, many hotspots were sent home to the club members' homes to provide youth with internet access for virtual learning and homework that they were not able to be in school. We have a quote from the Midlands president and CEO, Richard Webb, and I'm going to have to read this because I do not know it by heart. But I don't want to miss any words of it. When we think about how 2020 changed the way that all business and learning was done in our communities and the impacts that it had specifically on the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Midlands, the opportunity to have the 525 US cellular hotspots has been great. The CARES Act funding expired at the end of 2020, and US Cellular stepped up to the plate knowing how important these devices had become to stay engaged with our members and their support systems. That was truly extraordinary because these devices have played an essential role, allowing the Boys and Girls Clubs of Midlands to engage all of our members through our voice. And voice is an acronym that they have for Virtual Online Interactive Club Experience Programming in meaningful ways. So we not only engaged all of our members, but we learned how valuable our voice programming was in providing opportunities for our club members and their support systems. And they were able to engage in activities such as, not only their academic success, but cooking lessons, virtual games, reading together. They had virtual yoga classes together in groups for that social aspect of learning. So it goes much beyond just what we think of as traditional homework.
What positive feedback from the clubs and just what an incredible impact you've had on these students and families. Can we talk a little bit about what's coming up next for the program, where you see it going in the future?
As I said, we started small, we've adapted, and we have big goals for the program. We're going to be providing 245 more hotspots to 4 additional clubs within the next month. And we continue connecting with individual clubs to determine their need, with the expectation that we're going to have about 2,500 additional hotspots by the time school starts in the fall. What's great is that we know that one hotspot can really help more than one student. So as we think about the program, we're thinking about how we can impact as many kids as possible, right? Because you assume maybe like 3 or 4 kids are working on each hotspot. We've got multiple shifts within the club in a day. And so when you think about that, 2,500 hotspots can impact 10,000 or more kids. And so we're starting small, but we have big goals. We also know, and we should acknowledge, that hotspots are currently being used in one way, and that may shift, right, as more schools open for in-person learning. So we're going to be really mindful of continuing to communicate with the clubs to meet their needs, right? As mentioned, we're taking a really local approach here to make sure we're going to continue to meet these needs. This is truly a longstanding partnership, as I've mentioned, and we continue to want to invest and build together. Pandemic or not, US Cellular wants to support the initiatives of the Boys and Girls Club and make sure that our students are connected in the communities we serve.
Yeah, I think, as Cortland mentioned, as far as the future of the program, one of the reasons why we've had a longstanding partnership is because we have open and honest dialogue about what we need and about what comes next. And so I would say, if I was to say what the future of the partnership is, it's going to be that we're going to have some pretty great dialogue in the future, because nobody knows what the future world holds. I think a blended environment for how we deliver and how we teach and how we educate is here to stay in some form or another. It's like things have changed, that they're not going back to what they were before. So how the hotspots are being used right now may shift as schools reopen, but the definition of schools reopening is also probably not going to be the same as what we thought of before. And our clubs are the same way, is that the need for our clubs is even more. So as we bring in more kids, they'll need additional reliable access to help with the homework and the other lessons that they have, and also the way that we deliver programs at the club as well. So it's not only their homework that they're doing from school, but it's also the programs that they're having inside the club. I think the kids, will hopefully still be able to take these home and complete, the lessons that they need when they're not physically at a club. And that's the big thing for us. That was part of our original strategic plan, is that we have the physical locations, but the virtual club was something that was further back in our strategic plan that all of a sudden last year came really, really forward. But there will always be this gap, and we're just thankful that US Cellular helps us to fill that.
Cortland, Chad, thank you so much for joining us today for part 2 of the Connected Kids Summit. It's been a pleasure to talk with you both, and I'm sure everyone watching is just as inspired by this collaboration as I am. Thanks again for being with us today.
Hi, my name is Alex Cervello. I'm the Director of Corporate Social Responsibility for Verizon, overseeing our efforts in education and community. I'm joined today by Lydia Logan, our Executive Director of Verizon Innovative Learning Schools at Digital Promise. In partnership with Digital Promise, we have Verizon Innovative Learning Schools that are our opportunity to bring technology, access, and comprehensive professional development to Title I middle and high schools all over the country. In today's discussion, we're going to talk about some of the changes that we made to the program in response to the pandemic and some of the changes that we see moving forward in education. Before we talk about Verizon Innovative Learning, I do want to talk about Citizen Verizon, which is Verizon's responsible business framework. And our responsible business framework is our plan for economic, environmental, and social advancement. Our work is centered around 3 pillars: digital inclusion, climate protection, and human prosperity. Human prosperity is our work in creating opportunities for individuals and communities to thrive and responsibly grow our business. In climate protection, we're looking to reduce our impact of our direct operations and innovate to minimize climate impact on communities. And then in digital inclusion, we're addressing barriers to digital inclusion and enabling connectivity for those who need it most. And within that digital inclusion space, we have 2 main goals. One is to reach 10 million youth with digital skills training by 2030, and also to reach 1 million small businesses with the resources they need to thrive in a digital economy by 2030. Now, one of the key ways that we are going to reach 10 million youth is through Verizon Innovative Learning, which is where we enable students to develop the skills, knowledge, and capabilities needed to thrive in the digital world. We do that work through our schools program that I'm going to talk a little bit more about, STEM programs and summer camps that we do at historically Black colleges and universities, Hispanic serving institutes, and community colleges. We also have our K-12 platform that will allow any teacher in the United States to have access to emerging technologies and also learn how to make the shift to remote and hybrid instruction. And our innovation labs that are in select Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, where students have access to emerging technology, a custom-built learning space, and a design thinking curriculum. Verizon Innovative Learning Schools is our program where we transform schools by providing the tech, connectivity, and teacher training to all students in those buildings. We are currently in 264 Title I middle and high schools around the country, and in each of those schools, we offer technology for every student and teacher with up to 4 years of internet access. We also offer device insurance, content filtering, and mobile device management software. We know that digital inclusion does not stop at just providing a device to everyone. We also know that it is important for individuals to have the skills necessary to use those devices. So we also offer comprehensive professional development and a dedicated on-site instructional coach in each of our buildings. This past year, in response to the changing needs for schools in response to COVID-19, we actually began a hotspot model that will be launching this year. In this hotspot model, we're going to be providing Title I schools that have an existing one-to-one program with filtered mobile hotspots that have up to 4 years of internet access for any student in need. Those teachers will also have access to flexible asynchronous teacher training pathways and an on-site Verizon Innovative Learning Schools liaison. Now, this program has shown some significant impact. In 2020, when we surveyed our teachers, 92% of our teachers said that VILS, or Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, helped them explore new ways of teaching. 88% of them said that it helped them design more individualized instruction, and 84% said that because of Verizon Innovative Learning Schools, they saw increases in student engagement. Now, this year was very unique in education, and we were curious as to how prepared our teachers felt for remote instruction. Remote instruction was not the model that we ever intended for our teachers to be using. This program was originally intended to close the homework gap, but we wanted to know how prepared those teachers were. And according to our results, 93% of our teachers said that Verizon Innovative Learning Schools made aspects of remote instruction easier. And 92% of our teachers agreed that the professional development they've received helped prepare them for remote learning. So we're really proud of the impact we were able to make this year and for all the years prior that we've been in K-12 education. And we're really excited about the future. So I wanted to talk today to Lydia about what our plans are for the future, what we've learned from the pandemic, and what we think are some of the pieces that we see moving forward. So Lydia, do you want to talk us through some of the changes that we made to our program this past year and how we engage schools during school closures?
Sure. We saw, as we did across the country, that everyone pivoted quickly to get students devices and to support teachers the best way they could. We quickly worked with you all at Verizon to roll out the teacher technology pathways so that all teachers who wanted it had access to the instruction that we've been delivering in schools and we've seen works. We moved quickly in order to make sure that schools and students had what they needed to continue learning during the pandemic.
And do you have any stories? I know we obviously, in discussing with so many schools, we have so many stories about how schools use the devices in a unique way during these school closures. What are some stories that you'd like to share with the group?
Absolutely. We had schools in Compton where they were holding cooking classes. We found that parents were really unsure and unaware of some of the platforms their students were using. They knew what it was like to send their child to school in a building. They really didn't understand what was happening with remote learning. So by offering cooking classes on some of the other platforms, parents were able to familiarize themselves with the way that their students were learning in a very approachable way that also created community among parents when they felt disconnected from the school due to school closures. In addition to that, we had schools that were hosting parent town halls virtually. So students had devices at home. There were no opportunities for parents to find out what was going on and to stay connected to each other and to the school. And these town halls were successful. We found that these were not only successful during the pandemic, but most likely will continue when schools go back in person. They were things that probably never would have been offered in the past, but now that devices are available, that people are a little bit more comfortable with connecting to one another remotely, they were successful strategies for getting and keeping families engaged.
And Lydia, in addition to that, I know that we also have examples of Verizon Innovative Learning Schools that use their emerging technologies like 3D printers to actually create PPE for local frontline workers in the area. So really excited to see things like that. And something that we didn't mention is that in response to the pandemic, Verizon actually tripled the data allowance on all of our devices to ensure that students had a very easy transition to remote learning. Lydia, another question I have is we talked about a few changes that were really originally emergency responses to make sure that we were supporting educators in a timely manner. But what are some of those changes that you think we're going to make standard in the program moving forward?
Well, in addition to those parent engagement strategies that I mentioned, we have heard that our coaches, and that also came out in the same survey, were pressed into service not only to continue supporting the teachers in the schools to which they were assigned, but across the district. So they realized that schools who had been participating in this program were used to learning online. Students were used to getting their assignments, working on them at home. They had a lot of those strategies and processes in place. They needed those in place for their other schools. Our coaches were asked to help support teachers in other schools. What we've seen is we always knew coaching, instructional technology coaching in particular, when using technology in the classroom was really important to support teachers and make sure that they knew how to use the technology in meaningful ways. Now this needs to happen across the district, and it started during the pandemic, and we've heard that new FTE positions are being created for coaches to work with other schools. In some cases, our districts had coaches, they didn't have enough, and in some cases, they didn't have any. In most of what we're hearing, they're looking at how they can continue instructional technology coaching for teachers across the district, knowing that a one-to-one environment is likely to stay even after schools go back in person.
And Lydia, can you talk to me a bit more about some of the supports? So you mentioned how we're looking at district-wide support for educators and looking at the instructional technology coaching model. When we think about what this looks like on the IT side, because one of the key pieces of Verizon Innovative Learning that we do is we work with IT leaders to think about, now that you have all this technology in your district, how do you develop the structures to ensure that students always have access to a working device? Do you want to talk a little bit more about what some of that process looks like?
We work very closely with the district IT staff and site-based IT, and it's really important in maintaining a successful one-to-one environment to make sure every teacher and every child has a working device that's connected to the internet at all times. That means having a backup plan if a student's device is broken or isn't charged. That child needs to know where they go to get a loaner device. You need to make sure those devices are accessible on site and not locked up, 10 miles away in central office somewhere. All of those strategies need to be in place and will need to continue. We are putting together a toolkit around total cost of ownership for devices and the strategies for maintaining and supporting devices so that districts can start to plan all of those things that we have in place, thinking about device protection plans, thinking about cases, thinking about all of those things that you would need in order to make sure that the devices are working and that they stay working as long as possible so that learning can continue.
And Lydia, we know that digital inclusion is much more than just a device and connectivity. It's also ensuring that the recipients of that technology have the skills to use it effectively. So as we see a larger presence of corporate sponsors or corporate partners working to close the digital divide, what do you think will make their efforts most impactful in K-12 education?
I think it's really important to understand that the technology alone is not enough. At Digital Promise, we really think of three pieces. We think of access, so having the device and access to the internet, use, so are you using it? And then we think about participation. So you've got to have it, you need to get online, and then you need to use it. And quality use, meaningful use, happens when you are trained to do it. We want to make sure in school settings that teachers are comfortable and have the training that they need. So making sure that devices and access that are donated are coupled with support for teachers so that meaningful instruction is happening in schools. It is not enough to just donate the devices. I think finding collaborative ways to make those partnerships happen through districts, making sure that districts have are able to take the lead, that for all of us working with schools, we are supporting them in the work that they need to do, rather than putting so many strings attached to these contributions that they're not able to deliver instruction they've planned. So finding ways to be curriculum agnostic and flexible with the needs that the schools have while supporting them in providing the access and training that teachers need.
And Lydia, I think that this past year was actually a real test of our program, right? And how we prepared teachers to offer technology-infused pedagogy. The results show that we succeeded in that. Obviously, this year was a very unique year in how we approach education. But I think the holistic approach is really what's necessary. I also think that one thing that we've done as just a part of our program is we work with teachers on our advisory council. We talk to district leaders, we talk to school leaders, and we really learn from them what exactly it is that they need so that we are not creating solutions just for them, but actually creating them with them. And I think that's a key part of a lot of this, is ensuring that you are actually offering a solution that is what your districts need. It's not always just getting a device in everyone's hand, but thinking about what are the long-term implications of that.
We have an opportunity that we've thought about for a long time, right? This is why we've been doing this work. This is why this partnership has been so successful. And we saw our schools able to get back online and up to speed in general faster than their peers. Now, I don't want to overstate how difficult or understate how difficult this year was for everyone, but the fact that they had all these systems and processes and school culture in place to support technology enhanced learning really put them ahead of the game. We've learned that there are about 6 things that really need to be in place in order for schools to be successful, and we are working to communicate that more. Strong school and district leadership talking about the way that learning with technology happens, an accessible transformation plan that's well communicated to everyone, ongoing embedded professional learning opportunities for teachers. We've talked already about reliable and consistent access for students and teachers, ongoing support to promote families and caregiver engagement, and equity as a mindset, keeping in mind what it takes to have every child have meaningful experiences and use these devices. We will miss a big opportunity if after the pandemic, we stop sending devices home. We will continue to have a homework gap. We will probably see new ways of teaching and learning in schools for most children, but that homework gap, if we're not sending devices home and supporting teachers and families and students around what learning looks like when it's happening all the time, which is what we see for affluent students, we want to make sure that we continue to provide both access and support for students so that learning is not something that goes back to happening only during the school day because of resource issues, but really happens wherever learning can occur.
And I think we have to think about it from a safety perspective as well. If students have more flexibility in being able to learn from home rather than being in school, it just makes everything more safe, right? It allows for schools to properly socially distance. It allows them to properly have the classroom sizes that they want. And I think that offering that technology is really the only way that we get that flexibility. I'm excited because I think that what we're finally seeing is we understand that technology is no longer a nice to have in education. It's really a necessity. And it's opening a lot of educators and students to some of the possibilities that they have with personalized learning, with individualized learning, ways that students can access materials that they never were able to access before. So I think that there's a lot that this has opened up, but it's just imperative on us to make sure that those structures are in place for those students and teachers to continue to access those tools.
You're absolutely right, Alex. We've seen amazing things happening with students who have different physical disabilities and may not be able to navigate the school building. They've been able to be connected to their learning and to their classes by having technology. We've seen students who may be sick and are able to keep up with their homework while they're out. We've seen areas where they have hurricanes and all kinds of other things that keep students, right, weather disasters that keep them out, snowstorms. Students don't really love us talking about that, but a lot of our schools who live in that are located in the Northeast are able to continue learning during what would have been snow days, where days of learning would have been lost. So if they plan ahead, they're able to use technology to keep learning going. Now, there are lots of interesting ways you can do that. It doesn't have to be online synchronous learning all day, but it also means if you get 8 feet of snow in Vermont, you don't lose a week of school.
Exactly. You had mentioned earlier the teacher training pathways that we have, which are credentialed professional development pathways that any teacher in the United States can access. We obviously started it with really getting teachers ready for remote and hybrid instruction, but I'm excited because we just launched creating digitally inclusive and accessible environments. And we're also going to be launching more pathways on learner variability. So really working with teachers so that they understand what individualized instruction can look like while using these tools. So like you mentioned, it really allows every student to be able to thrive in a digital environment.
Yeah, I think having that eye on equity, which we are all thinking about these days, is what does this mean for every student? How can we use technology as a way to get an education and quality learning experiences, what we like to call powerful learning, where students have voice and choice and agency, where there are opportunities for them to have different types of learning experiences that are culturally responsive, that we look at their social emotional learning. All of these things are possible if we are thinking about it and deliberate about it, and again, provide the access and the support. So I think, there's lots of great ways that we'll see this coming in the next year. We've started down this road. I think in a lot of ways we are ahead of the game. We have to make sure that we keep moving forward and that we don't fall into this is the way we always did it. The pandemic is, easing up. And so now we can go back to the way we did things before. We know that we can do things better, and we are working on that now. What we've put in place can can be a demonstration for others. We would absolutely open up our schools and invite folks to contact us. We can connect them with our principals and our district leaders to talk about what they've learned and what they've seen and how this has changed the culture of learning in their schools. We have teachers and principals who move from one district to another and advocate to bring the program there. That was happening before the pandemic. We know that our schools are doing incredible work, and we look forward to continuing doing that work post-pandemic.
Absolutely. And we also have districts where we've seen that they've actually taken the program and used it in all of their middle schools or all of their high schools. So really excited to see the saturation levels that we have within these districts. Lydia, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. And I really appreciate all of the work that Digital Promise does to help Verizon in making Verizon Innovative Learning Schools a success. If anyone wants more information on Citizen Verizon, please visit citizenverizon.com. If you'd like to learn more about Verizon Innovative Learning Schools or apply to be a Verizon Innovative Learning School, please visit verizon.digitalpromise.org.
Hi, I'm Katie Dunbar, Director of Communications and Policy at CTIA. I'm joined today by Mylena Albright, Assistant Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility at AT&T, and by Brent Legg, Executive Vice President of Government Affairs at Connected Nation. Thank you both so much for being here today. Mylena, I thought we could start with you. Do you want to tell us more about how and why AT&T has made connectivity for students such a central focus of its corporate social responsibility efforts?
Absolutely. First off, Katie, it's a pleasure to be here today, especially for a topic that's so important as this. I'd like to go back for AT&T's history, and we have been committed to education for many years. Our most recent AT&T Aspire program invested more than $600 million in education since 2008, just to support underrepresented and underserved students and making sure they graduated from high school, had college access, and also had workforce development training. When the COVID pandemic hit last year, there were millions of students who were displaced from their classrooms, as you know, shifting them to remote learning. And AT&T had to quickly pivot our focus as well. So we quickly created the Distance Learning and Family Connections Fund. And that was an opportunity to give parents, students, and teachers the tools that they need for at-home learning. So that DLFC, or Distance Learning Family Connections Fund, and other programs that we provided in 2020 was about a $30 million commitment just for that year to students, families, and teachers. Well, we've doubled down on our work from last year to help narrow the homework gap, because even after students return to the classroom, we know that the digital divide and homework gap will still exist. I mean, I've received questions like, why are you going so deep here? Students will probably be back at school. Well, COVID didn't create the digital divide or the homework gap. It's existed long before and will exist long after. So we thought it was important to support students through this public health crisis, beyond it being just a social issue, but from a business and economic imperative as well.
It's so true. It's going to be a long journey. Brent, for those who aren't familiar with Connected Nation, what should our viewers know about your work and your focus?
Well, Katie, let me add my thanks for inviting me to join you here today. Connected Nation is actually celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. We were founded in Kentucky in 2001 with a focus on closing the digital divide. And of course, the digital divide means many different things today, and the digital divide has evolved in these 20 years that we've existed. So that can involve everything from lack of broadband infrastructure to lack of digital literacy to not being able to afford connectivity in the home. Affordability is still a huge issue today. And so our nonprofit exists to address the digital divide in all of its forms. And that's one of the reasons why we were so excited to partner with AT&T on a program to specifically address the homework gap.
So as you guys said, AT&T and Connected Nation recently teamed up to support schools and nonprofits around the country. Mylena, how did this partnership come together, and how did you choose to work with Connected Nation? And what can you tell us about AT&T's commitment?
No, it's a very good question. And one, I'll say, when we received the invitation to participate, I mean, the first organization I thought about was Connected Nation. We've had a long, impactful history partnering with Connected Nation. And we've partnered with them several years ago on the Connect Ed program. I think that was through the Obama administration. And we experienced great success with them. So when we decided to tackle the issue of homework gap, we knew that Connected Nation would understand the issue that we're facing. They had the expertise to help find the right organizations and schools that we were trying to reach, and they could help deliver the program across the country at the scale and the scope that we needed, right? So we knew that we had as many as 17 million students who were unable to take part in learning because their families didn't have a high-speed internet connection or devices to support distance learning. So we thought that it was important to get with Connected Nation because they got the issue. They truly understood. So they were first and foremost at the top of our minds as we thought about addressing this issue. Now, as far as the program itself, we wanted to provide internet service and devices to our most vulnerable students and underserved communities that we know that that's critical to closing the digital divide. So I'll get a bit more into the vulnerable students that we were looking at, but we were able to commit $10 million to support our nation's students with free internet access, Wi-Fi devices, and other educational resources in collaboration with Connected Nation. So through this commitment, we will support 35,000 students who are affiliated with more than 100 organizations and schools across the country. And at the point that we really got engaged here, we knew that a lot of companies, a lot of schools, a lot of organizations were working just to help students in general. And we felt that we should take that a step further to make sure that we could target our most vulnerable students. So students who have disabilities, students who are homeless, students who may be in foster care, students who have English as a second language, because they are at the greatest risk of being impacted by the homework gap and falling into that learning loss category. So that kind of gives a bit of background of the issue, how we wanted to deal with it, and the fact that Connected Nation was first and foremost on our list.
Yeah, it's going to be very impactful. And Brent, why are commitments like the one AT&T has made alongside Connected Nation so important? What can you tell us about the impact this has on the lives of students?
Well, as Mylena mentioned, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was estimated that nearly 17 million students across the country had no reliable connectivity at home. So when the pandemic shutdowns began, there were nearly 17 million children who were literally physically disconnected from formal learning opportunities. That's a tragedy that we've never seen in this country before, certainly not in the last 50 or more years. And so without connectivity, those students were going to remain disconnected from formal learning. And that can have a huge long-term impact on them. Even just a month of loss of learning can have an impact on a student, much less what we've seen as the pandemic has endured. And so it's so very important that we come together as a country to find solutions to bring connectivity into the home, especially those students who are most vulnerable. And so what drew us to this program and this partnership with AT&T was that this program was really focused on addressing the most vulnerable students within that 17 million student number. As Mylena said, students experiencing homelessness, students with disabilities, English language learners, students in the foster care system. There are so many children who, beyond just not having connectivity, may not even have a permanent place to live. And so the impact that the pandemic will have on learning loss on those students specifically is so significant. And so what we're able to do with this program is bring connectivity to more than 35,000 of those students across more than 120 organizations in 26 states. That is huge. And I think what this program is doing is providing a good test case for what the FCC and what Congress hopes to do in terms of addressing this issue of the homework gap more broadly, so that all 17 million students have the type of connectivity that they need. So again, we're extremely excited to be working on this project. The devices and connectivity is just now rolling out to those schools and nonprofits that were awarded service. And the stories that will be told in terms of the impact that this connectivity will have are just beginning to come in. And we're looking forward to telling more about those stories as we learn the impact that this program has had on lives.
On the technology point, what makes mobile hotspots or like mobile wireless technologies so valuable for these students, especially those that may be experiencing homelessness or, kind of on the move? How do these technologies that AT&T can provide really help in this situation? Probably a question for you both, but Brent, if you want to start.
Well, I think the great thing about wireless connectivity, right, is that it's not tethered to a specific structure or building or home, right? It can move with students. And unfortunately, many of the students that are part of this target group that this program is focusing on are students who may sleep in a different home or building during the week. They may move a few times during the week. And so providing a hardwired connection doesn't really provide the connectivity that those students need. They need wireless service that can move with them. And certainly as AT&T has invested in its network and is providing faster, more reliable services every day, this wireless connectivity can be that lifeblood that can move with them. So, there's certainly wired connectivity is really important, but it usually involves having a technician come out to a structure and install a service, activate that service. And then it doesn't, obviously, the very nature of a wired connection is that it doesn't move with the student. And so wireless is a perfect solution for addressing especially the most vulnerable among us, and provides that lifeblood of connectivity that they wouldn't be able to have otherwise. And it can be consistently available.
So I think it was important for us that when we knew we wanted to provide a mobile hotspot, that it also included a free broadband plan that went with it, right? So that way parents didn't have to worry about the data plan and how they would get internet to the hotspot. But I think it's really important when you can deliver a hotspot to a parent. So with the Greenup County School District in Kentucky, we've talked to a parent there who lives in a pretty rural community, and they don't have very fast internet. So they don't have many options. I mean, homework assignments that should take 30 minutes to an hour take about 4 to 6 hours because they have to wait for videos to buffer, and it's just difficult. So being able to provide that hotspot, not only takes a lot of the stress off of the parent who's engaged, with their children as students. It takes some of the stress off of the students, and they're able to really focus on the learning as opposed to how long it's taking to get the technology to work. So being able to provide something that is mobile, that, if they're not at home, they need to do their work somewhere else. It makes it so much easier. So that was why we focused on hotspots.
I know that AT&T's collaboration with Connected Nation is just the latest in the company's efforts to address issues like the homework gap. What else should our viewers know about how AT&T is working to bring connectivity and learning opportunities to students?
I'm pretty excited that we recently announced a $2 billion commitment to address the digital divide over the next 3 years. It's called AT&T Connected Learning, and this initiative will include the launch of a new educational platform with our colleagues at Warner Media. So they will use our Warner Media content to help reinforce Common Core curriculum as well as social emotional learning. So for example, with the movie Wonder Woman, we can use that to teach lessons on STEM or women's empowerment. And it's really just a different way to approach how we're teaching students and to really garner their interest and make them excited about learning. We're also going to include on that portal digital learning and literacy tools from leading education partners like Khan Academy and the Public Libraries Association. Another aspect of the program, we are launching 20 AT&T Connected Learning Centers across the country. And this is going to provide students with high-speed connectivity, resources for devices, those digital learning tools that I mentioned, mentoring opportunities with local AT&T employees. And just think about this as, your students may not have connectivity at home. We can't reach everybody, but having these core community centers where students can go and get all of these resources, I think is going to be very helpful in impacting that number of students who don't have access. So we're talking to partners in cities like Dallas, Cleveland, and Chicago to start opening centers early fall in time for back to school. But I'm proud to say that these commitments build on the $30 million we invested in distance learning and connections just last year in 2020. And then on top of that, our history of investment of $600 million since 2008 and the AT&T Aspire program. So we just continue to update how it is that we're able to serve students and to grow with the needs of the students that we have. So that's we'll be a little busy for the next several months.
I should say that's an incredible commitment. And I wish I had Wonder Woman classes when I was in school. Brent, as we know, the return to in-person learning is unlikely to diminish the need for connectivity among students. What's most important in the months ahead for the organizations receiving hotspots and free internet connectivity? What do you think that they're going to be focused on going forward?
Well, a lot of schools moved to virtual learning almost at a moment's notice back in March of last year, right? There wasn't a lot of preparation done when that virtual learning transition happened. Fortunately, over the course of last summer, a lot of school districts especially had the opportunity to prepare for the fall a bit more. But you're right, as in-person instruction returns, hopefully in many places across the country this coming fall, I think there's going to be a huge focus on how to prepare teachers to teach in a virtual learning environment, and then to bring technology into the classroom in a more integrated way. So I think that there will be a huge need and emphasis moving forward on pedagogy as it relates to helping teachers prepare to instruct both in the classroom using technology and then virtually at home. And fortunately, with these connections, the learning day does not have to stop at 3 or 3:30 in the afternoon. It can continue as students go home. That's why this problem was originally called the homework gap, because the lack of connectivity in the home prohibited students from being able to engage in formal learning and to do homework after the school day ended. So I think AT&T's investment with Warner Media here to create tools that assist in learning is huge. I think more of that is going to be needed. And I think school districts, state departments of education, et cetera, are going to need to be investing more in helping teachers adapt to this new reality. Fortunately, Congress has made learning devices, tablets, computers, laptops, Chromebooks, et cetera. Congress has made money available where a lot of states have been able to purchase those devices. But that was sort of done on an emergency basis. And now a lot of school districts are sort of taking a step back and thinking, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that teachers are fully prepared to integrate this technology in the classroom so they can have the biggest possible impact? So I think that's what a lot of what's going to be the focus as we move back to in-person instruction. But the great thing is we're going to have the connectivity in the home after the end of the school day too, which is really going to enhance the learning process for K-12 students.
Mylena and Brent, thank you both so much for the fantastic discussion. It's been wonderful to hear a bit more about how AT&T and Connected Nation are working together to help close the digital divide and keep kids connected. And to all of you, please stay tuned for the rest of the Connected Kids Summit Part 2.
Thanks for joining us today. My name is Avani Bell. I'm Director of Connected Life here at CTIA. We have a great panel with 2 dynamic women leaders working at the forefront of initiatives to keep kids and their families connected. especially during these unprecedented times. Speaking with us today is Dr. Keisha Taylor, who is National Education Administrator with T-Mobile. Dr. Taylor is an award-winning digital equity advocate and education curriculum and technology strategist. She was named a 2020 Digital Equity Innovator by FCC Commissioner Starks for her work helping to provide 2 million students across the country with vital mobile connectivity during the pandemic. We also have Gabriella Rowe, the founding principal of Grow Associates, her own consultancy firm. Gabby has a long history working in education and on issues at the intersection of education and connectivity. She was recently selected to lead the state of Texas's Operation Connectivity project, which we will get into more in our discussion today. Thank you both for being here. The last year has been unmatched by any other in my lifetime, and I imagine both of yours as well. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted most people's lives and routines as it relates to health, work, and education. The effect on education was particularly transformative, as approximately 50 million students in the US had to transition to some form of remote learning. This change highlighted ongoing challenges for educators as well as students and their families on how to educate children who had little or no connectivity at home. Millions of students without connectivity were suddenly unable to participate in school because they were disconnected from virtual classrooms. Discussions around how to address what has been labeled the homework gap have been ongoing in the policy sphere for some time. Dr. Taylor, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us about what the homework gap is and how was it exacerbated by the shifts during the pandemic?
Oh, goodness. The pandemic brought about just such a huge change for students and learning and the way that we deal with education across our country. A lot of the conversations we had really just immediately shifted to if they don't have internet access, they don't have access to the right to education. We don't know if our kids are okay, right? It was so much bigger than just talking about student achievement and student attendance and academia. It really did expand to how do we get the core wraparound services attended to so that students have an opportunity to even begin to be successful and can just attend class in general. You know, millions of students without connectivity are totally disconnected from virtual classrooms and just completely unable to participate in school. So what was the homework gap before the pandemic is now the schoolwork gap. It's a digital learning gap that far exceeds anything we could have ever imagined.
Gabby, you work directly with schools. What did you hear from school districts about the impact of the pandemic?
So Houston, it is third, fourth largest city in the United States, most diverse city in the United States. At the start of the pandemic, we could not locate 250,000 students in the greater Houston area. That's the 20 plus districts that make up the greater Houston area, not just HISD, but another number of other districts. 250,000 students who had no connectivity that we couldn't find at the beginning of the pandemic. You branch that out to the state of Texas, one state in the country, somewhere between 2.5 and 2.7 million students, almost all of whom were economically disadvantaged students who were already in challenging and under-resourced school communities, were lost without connectivity. We were fortunately able to find many of these students through the course of the pandemic and with the help of partners like T-Mobile and others, really locate them and get them some of the resources they needed. But that was really the overwhelming message from school districts. It wasn't about, oh my God, I have to meet my attendance numbers, or I have to make sure that I get these lessons or this curriculum covered. It was really, I can't find my students. I don't know if they're okay. I don't know what they need. I don't know how to support them, because we don't have connection to them.
I know that wireless companies, including T-Mobile, have stepped up even more than they were during the pre-pandemic to help try to bridge this gap. Dr. Taylor, can you talk a little bit about why your company felt it was important to step in and help in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you, T-Mobile started off having connected about 150,000 students through the Empower Ed Award program. And when the pandemic happened, we had that program, but we really didn't have anything that was short term and really spoke to the needs in the moment. And so we got together and we said, we're not set to launch Project 10 Million just yet, but we need to have an education solution that really speaks to this overdrive in thousands of schools consistently facing these very unique challenges as a result of the pandemic. The shift to online, this new school year created this massive pain point across education. And it really put us in overdrive to say, we have to speak to this. And so we've gone from connecting 150,000 students to now 2 million students, right, upon launch of Project 10 Million. And so we just provided this unlimited internet experience to students all over the country. And it wasn't unlimited, slower speeds. It was unlimited 4G LTE experience that could power the entire community. So when a child took a hotspot home, it wasn't just that student can access their homework. It's now mom or dad or both can access unemployment resources. They can apply for government assistance, right? They can, do some foreign language acquisition courses and learn a little bit of English to support what they need. They can order groceries online. They can, even grandparents that are taking care of our babies can access their Medicaid support and some of the other things that are critical, transportation services. So this was really about having a full circle approach to solving something for the communities that need us the most. And that's where private-public partnerships are so impactful. Yes, we connected 2 million students, but what does that mean for the number of family members we've been able to connect all over the country, right? And then Project 10 Million launched in September and has now connected almost 500,000 additional students and families through Project 10 Million. So we're talking about a progressive commitment to student connectivity that is only going to continue to grow.
You've mentioned a number of times T-Mobile's Project 10 Million initiative. Can you provide a little bit more background on that? What is the Project 10 Million initiative and how is it helping students and their families kind of get internet access?
Even though it's called Project 10 Million, that's speaking to the number of student households we want to impact. But it's a $10.7 billion commitment to the education space to provide critical student connectivity to the students that need it the most. Through their school district, right, and any EC K-12 public school district, the Project 10 Million provides eligible student households with a free hotspot and 100 gigs of high-speed internet access per year over 5 years. That means that, each year, that hotspot will never become a paperweight. When the student exhausts the data on their anniversary date, they'll have another pot of 100 gigs of high-speed internet access. There's also access to Wi-Fi enabled devices that are at cost. So we've used our buying power as a Fortune 40 organization, submitted an RFP, and got pricing for low-cost PCs and Chromebooks so that families and school districts don't have to bear the additional cost burden that goes along with trying to provide devices, critical devices for these students. And definitely last but not least, we've made the process really easy. School districts can go directly to tmobile.com/P10M or /Project 10 Million.
Gabby, can you tell us a little bit more about Operation Connectivity in Texas and how Grow Associates, your firm, has been involved with this effort?
So Operation Connectivity, which is the statewide effort for connectivity in Texas, launched in May of 2020. And it was obviously a response to the pandemic. And the stated goal of the project was to ensure that all 5.5 million public school students in the state of Texas have an e-learning device, which means a keyboarded laptop or a Chromebook or a tablet with a keyboard, and internet connectivity sufficient for learning. And that piece was super important. So bandwidth had to be strong enough that Students could do their back and forth real-time Zooms or Teams with teachers, and that it wasn't about, I'm going to download all of these assignments and then I'm going to, at a later date, upload them again. We wanted real-time learning for all of our students. And I think this is where T-Mobile and some of the earlier companies that stepped up at the very beginning of this, because it was real for them, not necessarily because they saw it as an opportunity. And I've got to throw in there, Dr. Taylor's an educator, and so many of the people that are involved in this on the private side are educators, so they're thinking of it from that same mindset. And so Operation Connectivity has now switched from thinking about that sort of triage, where in the end we were able to get 4.5 million devices into the hands of districts in the state of Texas. So 3.5 million keyboarded learning devices and 1 million hotspots. And we were one of the worst one-to-one states in the United States at the beginning of COVID, one of the worst. We are now fully one-to-one as a state. That, if we can do that in Texas, there is no excuse in my book for anyone else in the country. We want to ensure that we continue to work with our partners to make sure that this is a foundation we have built, a really strong foundation of technology and partnership and collaboration, and one we continue to build on. It's one of the things I love about Project 10 Million. It has a long-term time frame. Those hotspots continue to use. T-Mobile's commitment to the state of Texas continues. And I will add that in that flexibility category, the way we administered Project 10 Million in the state of Texas was, as part of Operation Connectivity, we took the full allocation for the state. We then ranked districts based on percentage of economically disadvantaged students, and we made sure that every one of those devices went into one of the most economically disadvantaged households in the state, and that all of them got used.
In your earlier discussion, you talked a lot about, really being focused on data. And I was curious if either you, Gabby, or maybe Dr. Taylor, if you guys have any additional data you can share on sort of the results of the partnership so far between T-Mobile's Project 10 Million and Operation Connectivity in Texas. You talked a little bit, I think, about how you're now at a 1-to-1, but I didn't know if you had any other stats or information you'd love to share.
I will give you the stat on connectivity for our economically disadvantaged students. So we have 3.3 million economically disadvantaged. That's free lunch, reduced lunch students across the state of Texas. I would say that's bigger than some states. So 3.3 million economically disadvantaged students. Less than 2% of those students at the beginning of COVID, we believe, had full connectivity. That means a device plus a hotspot or connectivity. That group is now up to 33%. So we're not at 100% with that group, but and we are at 100% for the laptop. We now have enough laptops across the state that we feel comfortable that we need to sustain it, but we don't need to build it anymore. But 33% of our families are covered from a high-speed connectivity standpoint. That's 31% more than at the beginning of COVID. But it gives us a really, really concrete goal that we need to continue to keep chopping away at.
Dr. Taylor, anything you want to add?
No, I think, when you think about the coverage conversation, I think that Gabby is just spot on. And we've talked about this extensively over a year now, and making sure that if we're going to put a device into the hands of a student, or if we're going to promise this critical connectivity, that it actually works, right? And we're not just doing this blanket coverage conversation to say, oh, we have coverage everywhere, 99.9% of the city, we can make sure that we fire it up. There's a very big difference between I have coverage when I'm sitting outside in the elements and the cold and the heat, maybe it's not safe, or I have coverage in the safety and the comfort of my own home, where I can engage in the learning experience in a way that does not take my attention away from my teacher, and doesn't make me question whether or not I'm going to be okay, right, while I'm getting this access. And so that's really T-Mobile's commitment. And we've done that side by side with Gabby and state leaders all over the country
These students' entire future depends on us fixing this. So one more stat I have to throw in there, which is from another country that experienced what it means for your students to be out of a learning environment. So I'm sure Dr. Taylor's heard the story already. In Argentina, several years back, there was a teacher strike and school shut down for 3 months. So nothing, no interaction with the students, no interaction with the teachers, but it was 3 months. They decided it was over. They all went back to school and quite frankly, just picked up where they left off. There wasn't anything remedial, but they just in-person learning exactly as they had done before. And what they found is that for the most part, most of the students caught up in terms of their literacy and reading. What they found in math was that none of the students caught up. And that when they followed those students over time through the employment process, they found that there was a 20% deficit for those students in terms of their ability to earn after their education. 3 months. Imagine the implications that we have, not just for our students as human beings from the pandemic, but for our overall economy as a country. That group of students, that is the economic engine of this country for decades, generations to come. We must make this investment, or T-Mobile won't have students to employ when Dr. Taylor and I finally decide to retire. There won't be the students to create those new innovations. There won't be students who are able to earn enough money to live in urban environments and continue to grow our cities. And, the list goes on and on. So this is critical work for our generation today, but for so many years to come.
That's so true, Gabby. And it makes me think about, even our emphasis on diversity and inclusion, right? And how we want to empower these populations of students and community members to be critical parts of the innovative technology structures that will create the workforce of tomorrow. And I just absolutely love what you just shared, because it sheds a little bit of light on some of the projections of the outcomes that are possible as a result of the pandemic that we haven't even started talking about yet.
I want us and all of our partners like T-Mobile to be part of the solution. And I have to just remind everyone that the very first call when I started working on those 250,000 students that were missing in the city of Houston, my very first call was from Dr. Taylor. And it wasn't, I've got this program I want to do with you. I've got this thing you should sign up for. It was, I have no idea how we're going to fix this, but I know we've got to. So let's put our brains together and figure out how T-Mobile and Houston and then the state of Texas can make a difference here. And then Project 10 Million came and it blossomed forward. And those are the kinds of corporate partners I want to march off into a problem like this with, because that means we'll actually get it done.
Wow, this has been a really great discussion. Thank you for your great, insightful discussions about the state of connected education during the pandemic. And thank you for joining CTIA's Connected Kids Summit Part 2.
And thank you to our speakers from US Cellular, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, Digital Promise, Connected Nation, and Grow Associates. We're so glad you could join us, and we look forward to continuing this vital conversation in the weeks to come.